and its payload was the S-HALE-2, a Qatari communications satellite that was built by Japan's Mitsubishi Heavy Industries. And it's going to be providing satellite TV in the Middle East and in North Africa, as well as it has a transponder on board for amateur radio in the S and X band range. And the first stage landed on the Atlantic drone ship, Of Course I Still Love You, the 31st time that SpaceX has landed a booster. And this particular Falcon 9 Block 5 booster has actually flown twice now. Its first flight was launching Telstar 18 Vantage on September 10th of this year. And again, beautiful footage coming out of SpaceX from this particular launch. So very happy to see that. Oh, man, but moving right along, this one probably might be my favorite launch of the week. We had a Soyuz FG launching from the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan that launched Friday, November 16th at 1814 Coordinated Universal Time. Its payload was the Progress MS-10 spacecraft, a resupply cargo ship that had about 2,450 kilograms of cargo and supplies bound for the International Space Station. It should arrive to the station on Sunday and will dock at the aft port of the Zvezda module. And as I mentioned, this was a Soyuz FG rocket. This is the first reflight of the crewed version of the Soyuz that failed to reach orbit last month during that launch when it was a failure with the booster separation. With this launch, Roscosmos should be able to proceed with the next crewed launch that's scheduled for December 3rd. So very happy to see that they not only were able to identify the cause of the failure last time on this particular rocket, but have cleared with this launch and hopefully all their others in the future. Oh, but we're not done yet. We have a couple more launches that happened this week. Oh, man. For this next launch, we had an Antares 230 rocket. And that 230 designation, the 2 means it has an upgraded first stage that's using 2 RD-181 engines. The 3 means it has a Castor 30XL upper stage. And 0 means it has no optional third stages. This launched from Launch Complex 0A at the Mid-Atlantic Regional Spaceport on Wallops Island, Virginia, on this morning, Saturday, November 17th at 9:01 Coordinated Universal Time, and its payload was the Cygnus cargo ship, the 10th mission for the CRS mission, and its name was the SS John Young, after the astronaut who passed away this year. It also had 3,350 kilograms of cargo and supplies for the International Space Station, and after progress, it's going to arrive at the station on Monday, and is going to be berthed to the Unity module of the space station. There's only one more flight left for Cygnus under the original CRS contract before CRS-2 kicks in. Whew.
Oh, wow. Mike! Good job on this. Nicely done. Very well done. So, Mike, after that incredible amount of speaking and breathing that you just did, I'm going to ask you, what was your most exciting launch that you had this week? Like, what was the best moment this week?
That's hard to say because I'm a big fan of the GSLV Mark III, but then both the Electron and the Falcon 9 flight were just beautiful to watch. Just the footage alone was just beautiful to watch. But I think I'm probably most excited about the Progress and the Cygnus vehicle launching within 24 hours, and especially with the Soyuz FG rocket, them clearing that for flight. Now we should be able to proceed with the following launches, have the next crewed launch on December 3rd, and not have to abandon the space station for a little while until things get going. So I'm very happy to see that. And I guess we should go over the launch statistics so far for the year.
Yeah, let's see the scores.
China has 33 launches, 32 of which have been successful. And now the United States has 30 launches that they've launched, all of which were successful. Russia has 15 launch attempts, 14 of which were successful. And then Europe and Japan are tied at 6. And India now has 5 for a grand total of 93 launches that have taken place this year. Wow. Things are getting crazy. And I'm very happy to see that the United States is catching up to China. So there might be a chance with the last couple of launches that are scheduled for the rest of the year that it's definitely going to be a close tie one way or another. Or the United States might actually launch the most this year. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll have to see and then get the results of that bet paid out on air, so that way everyone can see that it has actually happened. Well, thank you.
I bet for Earth.
Good way to do it. So I guess one day we'll have to take that into account, which that's going to be really fun when we get to do that.
There was actually a couple of things. So there was... Matt Eddy from YouTube says that's a lot of minutes. You the man, Mike, first of all. But then asks, do we know how SpaceX decides which East Coast launch pad they use?
Well, they have 2 launch pads that they can use from the East Coast, from Cape Canaveral. They have Launch Complex 40, which is technically on the Cape Canaveral Air Force Base, and then they have Launch Complex 39A, one of the former shuttle pads, and previously a Saturn V pad as well. And that's on the Kennedy Space Center side. It's still part of, the Air Force still kind of controls that entire launch range, but they use both of those pads for different reasons. And I think what determines which pad they use on the East Coast is just their schedule. I don't think that there's any difference with them being so close to each other as to what their inclination or what their orbital parameters would be, because they're basically launching from the same place. But I think it has more to do with their schedule. And eventually, once the crew, the commercial crew vehicles start flying, those are all going to be launching from Launch Complex 39A, because that's where they installed the crew access arm that astronauts would actually be able to get to the rocket to. So. I think it's just a scheduling issue of alternating between those 2 pads.
Awesome.
Yeah. So, and they don't have that problem out here on the West Coast with just a single pad out at Space Launch Complex 4. So, pretty cool stuff.
Cool access arm.
Yeah, it is beautiful too. If you've never seen the images of the access arm, you should definitely jump online and Google SpaceX crew arm, and you'll see it literally does look like it's from the future. So, which is pretty nice, I gotta say.
Or the 1970s monorail.
Yeah, that's true. Oh, hey, what do you know?
Yeah, it's like a 70s vision of the future type of look to it. That's
so cool.
Yeah, we're definitely not into that here. So
Keep it current.
Yeah, we don't think about 1986 Tomorrowland vision of the future. Anyways, all right. So I'll go ahead and go first here today with some of the new
So
stuff.
Jared, what do you have?
nice.
So I want to talk about something really, really cool that actually could usher in like a completely new era of exploration of our solar system.
How so, Jared? Tell
Well,
us
I'll
how.
tell you how so. So have you guys ever heard of this thing called the Breakthrough Prize Foundation?
No.
You never heard of it? So it was started by a Russian billionaire called Yuri Milner, who basically wanted to throw a ton of money at these different problems or science things that nobody had been able to solve yet.
So
he
kind
did-
of like X Prize Foundation?
Sort of, except it wasn't like, hey, go do something and I'll give you money. Yuri Milner was just like, take my money, go do this.
Okay.
So one of really, I think the most reported on one was Breakthrough Listen, where he gave $100 million to get radio telescope time for like the search for extraterrestrial intelligence and other groups like that are hunting for signals from intelligence somewhere, potentially in our own galaxy. So yeah, that's the kind of stuff he was funding. So they actually kind of got in touch with NASA because last year they expressed an interest in actually trying to fund a mission to go to Enceladus. Which is,
Enchiladas.
Yeah, enchiladas, as Ben says. But as usual, Ben is wrong.
He can't say anything.
So, I'm right here.
He just has to accept
I know
it.
you are. So, what are you
He's on
going to do about
camera.
it? So, anyways, Enceladus.
There you go.
Enceladus is a really fascinating target because it has the potential for habitability there, and when we look at its surface, we can see that it's relatively young because there's not a lot of craters there, and craters are sort of the way you measure ages of surfaces in the solar system. So if you look at something like the moon, which has a ton of craters all over it, we know that the moon is very old. It's been geologically dead for a while. And you look at Enceladus, it's like nice and sort of semi-smooth. There's not a lot of craters, so there you go.
An ice rink, yeah.
Enceladus, for those of you who may not know or may not remember, because Saturn's got a lot of moons.
Yes.
So
many moons.
Enceladus, I just Googled it, is the 6th largest moon of Saturn.
Covered in ice.
There you
Yeah.
go.
Yeah.
And it actually, it is covered in ice. It's kind of like Hoth. If you ever look at it, if you ever see the
yeah.
photos of it.
If you look
Pretty
close
much.
enough, you can actually see the AT-ATs. Pretty cool.
Don't talk about the rebel base.
But it's edgier because it's got tiger stripies.
Oh,
yeah,
yes.
that's true.
That's the real Star Wars conspiracy. It all actually happened right here in our solar system.
Nice.
Yeah, obviously, the hints are in the Indiana Jones movies. There's been proposals in the Discovery and the New Frontier programs from NASA to basically say, hey, we want to send these missions, but none of them are getting picked up.
Sure.
So everything's going to Mars or somewhere else, and it's just come on.
Yeah.
Enceladus is an amazing place. It might have life. It's got these plumes right there that are coming right out of its South Pole region, so you could literally just fly a spacecraft through it. sample it in situ and then see if there's life in those plumes coming out of it. So NASA kind of actually hooked up a little bit with the Breakthrough Prize Foundation, and they kind of actually came towards each other. NASA was like, "Hey, we heard that you were interested in Enceladus," and Breakthrough Prize Foundation would basically like, "Hey, we are interested, and if you want to help, we're not like opposed to you helping us out." So they have basically signed a unfunded Space Act agreement for NASA to provide technical expertise and planning knowledge to the Breakthrough Prize Foundation to do what they call a pre-phase A portion of their mission. So phase A in a mission is basically when you are getting like the baseline of your designs and basically what do you want to do with your mission. So they're doing the pre-work for that, and NASA's helping them out with that. Okay. And they're spending about $70,000 in order to do that, which is relatively cheap.
They're spending breakthroughs cash.
NASA's spending their own money, but there's no money crossing each other. Okay. So it's sort of like in their own respective corners, they're doing their own work.
Right.
I
found project.
And so they're going to start working on it in 2019, and by December 2019, Breakthrough is actually going to present their pre-phase A work that they've done, and NASA at that point will determine whether they actually want them to go into phase A and actually start planning a mission, where NASA would be collaborating with them on that mission.
And would they accept funding, or?
I think that is sort of the toss-up at this point, because if NASA does come on board with that and say like add an instrument or something like that to the Breakthrough Prize Foundation and what they're working on, this would essentially be the first public-private partnership of a mission of exploration in deep space, which would be
where the private party is the one who's taking the lead on it.
Yes, exactly. And this is like nobody's ever done it. Yeah. So and that's very exciting with that, because we've seen what private companies have been able to do with commercial transportation and resupplying the International Space Station, and in just a couple of months sending astronauts to space on behalf of NASA. So I'm like really excited to see what Breakthrough is going to be able to basically bring to the table for NASA and see how that progresses as well.
And for those of you who want to play along at home, just in case, it's breakthroughprize.org, in case you wanted to look that up.
And so if Breakthrough is doing the research, or kind of like, are they kind of like in an RFP stage then?
RFP.
Request for proposal.
Thank you.
There we go. Sorry.
So I think it would be beyond that. They're basically at the point where they are. Well, no, actually, you are correct. Excuse me. Let me walk that back a little bit.
Thank you.
They are at the request for proposal point. But they're doing like but instead of like 5 different missions to 5 different places all competing at the same time, it's like it's very focused. It's
you already know the destination.
It's just Breakthrough, and it's like, okay, let's see what you can do, kid.
Awesome.
Kind of thing with it.
Sorry, one last question. This is fascinating.
Go for it.
Who are the scientists at Breakthrough? Like, do they contract out to professionals or like specialists, or do they have their own in-house like?
Breakthrough has their own in-house scientists that they work with. So unsure of who they are in terms of names, but they do have their own in-house scientists, which is like super exciking.
That's awesome. Very cool.
Yeah, I know they have a lot of NASA people that are like part of like their public faces, like Pete Worden, formerly who controlled like the space wing and stuff like that, did a lot of stuff with the military. He is consulting with them, and I know there's a couple other people that are doing consulting work with Breakthrough as well. And some of you guys might have heard of Breakthrough Starshot. I'm sorry if I missed that. Did you mention Breakthrough Starshot?
I did not talk about that. You could, if you want to talk about that, Mike.
This is the same company that's wanting to do the whole thing of like laser propulsion with the tiny little chipsats to hopefully be the first object to reach Alpha Centauri system and send out like thousands of them at a time and stuff like that. So it's all being bankrolled too by the Russian billionaire Yuri Bilner. So I think that it's really interesting that a little bit. But like with the battle of the billionaires there, instead of having his own rocket and stuff like that, he's just like, no, I'm just going to build the cool stuff that I'm sure everyone wants to go see. So I think that I like his take on Let's go to Alpha Centauri. Let's send the first private mission to Enceladus. I mean, that's really cool.
Yeah, it's super exciting, and I really cannot wait to see the meat and potatoes of that start to come together. With that.
What would happen with the research? So I know that NASA is open. It's open source because we own it.
Yes.
American taxpayers,
we pay for it.
NASA, so everything
Right.
is ours. That's not top secret, classified, anything like that. But if another company has paid for the hardware that's doing the research, do we have any idea? Has NASA indicated what kind of contract they would be arranging with this company about whatever comes out?
Yeah, that's
whatever
really
developments
interesting.
come from this.
So as far as I know, from everything I've seen, that has not been addressed yet. And that is kind of a little bit of a big deal because we do have to remember that NASA puts everything into the public domain because it belongs to all of us.
Right.
So if you have a private company come in, I guess that kind of does bring up some ethical questions as to whether if that data is there and Breakthrough sends the mission and gets the data, are they going to go to basically put their data set together and then say to universities, hey, we'll give you $100,000 for the data set.
Right.
So,
I guess it would
So-
determine where the funding is really coming from as far as like who actually will have rights to that. So if NASA's funding most of it, I would assume that it's public domain, that this information can be out. But if it's a private company and NASA's kind of just aiding in it, then maybe it'll stay confidential.
Yeah, and
That's
you know,
what I
this
would
is...
And that's
Go ahead, Mike.
That's the way it's going right now with the whole unfunded Space Act agreement. I mean, NASA might not even be doing a whole lot of work for this. They're basically just sharing data and expertise so that they can put together and design this mission. And at least with the Breakthrough Starshot stuff, they've talked about how, whatever data that they would collect that they would put out there in the open domain. And just kind of from a legal standpoint too, I mean, just because they have people that are already from different countries, not just the United States, working on the whole Breakthrough initiative and all their different projects they're working on, in order to cooperate with NASA, I mean, they basically have to have like fundamental research. Like they basically have to promise to put all this information out into the public domain. Excuse me. I have no idea whether or not their contracts are set up that way, but just based on the language that they have talked about, results that they're going to get from their other projects, it sounds to me like they're going to put it all out in the public domain. But that's just what I think from things that they've previously said. I don't actually know.
Yeah, I know Breakthrough Listen, they put all of that data out in the public domain to basically allow anyone to look through it and even to allow things like SETI at home, the distributed computing where you can actually use your own computer at home to go through the radio data and try to find it on your own. So, which if you want to, I highly recommend you go sign up and you let your computer's downtime actually do something.
Totally.
So, open source is the way to go.
So,
There's a couple
agree.
comments coming off of Twitch. Hanny's for Warp, I can't say it, I apologize. Twitch says, I like seeing NASA in an advisory role with all these companies going to space, which is, Ben has been talking about that a couple of times. And then Neuropilot, also in Twitch, says, it's often easier for NASA to quote-unquote buy the data than oversee the project or directly fund it. Which is, that's interesting. Ben has been on the show a number of times saying, maybe instead of NASA building the thing, maybe NASA should be funding the thing that, or funding the companies that do the thing, which is an interesting concept.
and that model was tested with like commercial cargo and commercial crew, and it seems like that model has paid off.
Yeah.
So I guess we'll see. Again, this
that'd
is
be really cool.
This is like a true first in terms of like space science exploration. Like we're not talking around the Earth. We're talking like beyond the Earth, into deep space, into the solar system. Nobody's ever done this before, so we're going to literally watch the rule book get written over the next year or two about this.
Nice.
Exciting.
Very exciting stuff. And I want to talk about something pretty exciting because there's explosions.
Yay!
I like explosions.
Explosions in the sky.
And magnets and doomsday and other. It just sounds like a great comic book. Just waiting to happen. So, Tina, tell us about the magnetic explosion doomsday cool stuff.
Yeah, I kind of titled this crazy because
Like a good band name, too.
Right?
Yeah, there's a
That's the name of my
station.
punk band. Magnetic Explosion Doomsday. So
There was an explosion in something known as the magnetotail, which is around Earth. So we have a magnetosphere around Earth. And the magnetotail is kind of like what it sounds like. It's the tail end, so it's the side facing away from the sun.
Okay.
And there was this explosion that happened, known as a magnetic reconnection, and they actually happen quite a lot. It also it's what leads into like coronal mass ejections and solar flares. So it usually happens from really excited particles, like in plasma.
So it's not like an explosion like we understand it here on the Earth.
Like kaboom.
It's not like a kaboom.
It's definitely not like
It's
a
more like
kaboom
a-
atom bomb. It's like
Gotcha.
Yeah,
But like
yeah.
really intense. Like you
It's
don't want to
really
be
intense.
in that.
It's like a magnetic field driven.
Yeah.
Like all of a sudden it just goes really fast.
Yeah, exactly.
Whoa, that's cool.
And because it's like energy and charge power, it's like super, super fast, moves at like supersonic speeds. But because it's such highly charged particles, it affects like our power grid, which is why I said Doomsday for Power Grid as my title. Excuse me, everyone. And so, like fighting a cold. So this is the first time that scientists have actually been able to measure such like intense details of it, because they have NASA has a space mission called the MMS, which is, let me see if I can remember this. This is what I
It's
call it.
M&M's. M&M's.
A little different than M&M's.
M&M.
Right.
It's more than just a text messenger.
That's
There he is.
So
Mike is right.
it's called the Magnetospheric Multi-Scale Mission.
Okay.
So it's 4 spacecraft. And in the first half of their mission, they've actually been studying the side of the magnetosphere that's by the sun. So you have the solar wind that's blowing all these charged particles. It's interfering with our magnetosphere. It's causing like auroras, northern lights, those pretty things. But this is the first time it actually went on the other side to the magnetotail and was able to actually pick up data from that. And so why this is so exciting is because on that side of Earth, you have all of the magnetic lines that are only from Earth. It's no interference of the sun. So it's totally different type of particles. It's still a lot of immense energy. But because of this explosion that happened recently, they were able to actually like measure the direction that the particles were moving in 100 times faster than they ever have been able to before, because these 4 spacecraft went directly through it while this explosion happened. So yeah, super cool.
So with those 4 spacecraft, were they flying in formation?
That I don't know.
Okay,
That
because I
I'm
was
not
thinking
sure.
if we know the positions of those 4 spacecraft and we understand the data that's coming in through them, you can actually build I would imagine, build a 3-dimensional
like a
model
scale.
that you're looking
Yeah.
at. So.
Almost.
Whoa, that is cool.
Yeah. So I haven't been able to see
fun
like
is it?
as far as any diagrams go. So I didn't see that. There was like, some cool images. I think I shared one of them. We might have shown already, which was just like what the spacecraft. It was like a artist rendition of what the spacecraft looked like going through it. But yeah, I mean, the thing is, this is actually something that happens every day. Like these explosions happen every single day. Like they're always going on, but they're usually not like super intense. Occasionally it will be. And then that's when it can affect, like I said, the power grid. It also can affect, it happens all throughout our universe. So it's super important for like understanding space weather, and like also when we want to travel to space, and like will it mess up our GPS, and what happens when we want to negotiate, go to the grocery store on Mars. Like, I don't know, something for the future. So I thought this was really awesome. And
I just thought of something cool. Since space weather is something we definitely need to be cognizant of, does that mean that there's going to be space weathermen and women? So that we'll have like a 5-day or like a 5-year forecast?
I was going to say, if you go on community.tomorrow.tv, one of our viewers every week posts a video. I don't know who does it, but they do like an actual space weather video in front of a green screen, just
that's
like you would
amazing.
see, a regular weather person doing. So,
do
and
they
I
encapsulate the weather madness?
Yes, she does.
She weather
nails it.
womanness.
So every
Sorry.
time, and she's
Such an old
amazing
fashioned
at it.
sunspots,
So.
and now all of a sudden to your left, you're going to see the sunspots.
So what you're telling me? So I thought when spacecraft went into the Earth's magnetotail, right?
Yeah.
I thought when they went into that, they actually had a little bit of protection, but it sounds like with this magnetic recombination, they don't.
So what do you mean by protection? As
Like,
far as
there was
materials?
high energy particles
don't
and
get
things
fried?
hitting them. Yeah,
Okay.
Mike got it, so they
What
don't
did
get
he say?
fried. So
Yeah.
Oh, so they don't
the
get
field
fried.
itself is protecting the spacecraft.
Yeah.
But now it sounds like the field, our Earth's magnetic field, is the problem, or the energy
It is.
source.
So yeah, the Earth's magnetic field definitely protects us from like solar winds and space weather and like any like when a coronal mass ejection happens. But there are these occurrences that are happening, and it can definitely still affect as far as things on Earth. It definitely didn't fry the spacecraft at all. Like the spacecraft are totally safe. This was the whole point, was for them to try to go through it. So I know what you're saying as far as that it would be protecting Earth. But Spaceback, were you going to say something else?
Yeah, this trips me out because I didn't even know that the magnetic field lines on Earth disconnected at all. Because on the sun, when the magnetic field lines disconnect from the surface, isn't that what causes a solar flare and a coronal mass ejection? And even when on the sun, when those magnetic field lines that are wandering do reconnect together, isn't that also a very violent event as well?
Yes, yeah, and so that's actually what's happening here.
Crazy.
So there's two different times there's two different terms I forgot to mention of what a magnetic reconnection is. There's a symmetrical and an asymmetrical one. So what I was reading, which I thought this was really cool, was the side facing the sun is considered asymmetrical because it causes this like asymmetrical pattern of the solar winds and then the charged particles from our magnetosphere, causing this reconnection. Like you said, you have all these like lines twisting and turning, and occasionally they'll collide and cause this type of reaction. But this is the first time that there was a symmetrical magnetic reconnection that was found, and that's the one that's in the magnetotail or magnetotail, and that's the one that's on the side away from the sun without the solar wind interfering. So it still has an effect, as you were saying, like it still causes some type of like, a type of like explosion. Yes, it is described as an explosion. So it does still have that, but for sure it's a bit different than when you actually have what's being caused from the sun and the Earth, and then when you have just what's going on from just the Earth. So it's considered symmetrical.
Wow,
which is crazy. So cool. Yeah, but it's literally shaped like a tail.
There's there's a chat
flame, just magnetic. Oh my god.
There's a question from the chat room from Theron says, can we harness magnetic reconnections as an energy source?
I hope so. I don't know right now. I don't think I'm sure scientists have considered that. Yeah. I didn't read anything about research being done to actually do it. That would be amazing because I think that would be getting close to like a Dyson sphere would be like trying to harness all the energy from the sun, right? So that's like, I guess, the first step to trying to harness energy anyway. But I don't know right now. That would be awesome. I hope so. Because if you can predict when these things will actually occur, so this is also why this is so important for this research. Because if we can start to maybe pick up patterns of how frequent these things happen, then maybe we can predict when it'll happen. And maybe we can encapsulate somehow the energy and harness it for something.
Well, and then so we have the magnetosphere here on Earth. Is there a magnetosphere? I can't even say it. On Mars? Like, and how does this? No, everyone's on. They all looked at me like I was crazy.
No,
I mean, that's good.
You need a dynamo. It's actually one of the comments that we've got coming up later in the show.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Then we'll talk about it then.
Okay. Sounds good. All right. Speaking of death, just rolling on with this here. You got Sarah. We're going to take a little trip to the southern hemisphere.
Okay, the Atacama Desert. Yeah. Okay, so the closest indicator, or I don't want to call the Atacama Desert an analog for Mars on Earth because it's not as devoid of atmosphere as Mars is. It's not as dry as Mars is, and there is life there, but. We can use it kind of as a bellwether, kind of an indicator of what might happen when we got to Mars. And, well, the Atacama Desert, the core of the desert is so dry that
How dry is it?
How dry is it?
It's drier than it's been out here.
It's so dry that the only life there was 16 species of microbe.
Wow.
Whoa.
There was no plant life. There was no multicellular animal. Just 16 different types of microbes.
16.
Yes,
wow.
16. That was until 2015 when global warming caused some rain to happen in the core of the Atacama Desert it has not seen rain in 500 years.
Whoa.
Right. Whoa. So those 16 species of microbes,
they grew.
They're down to 2. Oh. It created a mass extinction.
Oh, God.
Whoa. Yeah. So these microbes, they are so evolved, so adapted to extreme arid conditions.
What are they called? What are they called?
Oh, extremophile.
Saturday, see the extremophiles. Wow. Tickets are still just $10. Right?
So we work at the Griffith Observatory, and that's one of the things that we do in our Let's Make a Comet show.
That's amazing.
Really like monster trucks.
Yeah, monster trucks are cool, but it sounds like...
Sunday. All right, so these extremophiles, these 16 microbes, 16 species, they had evolved to pull every last bit of moisture out of their arid climate. And when they got inundated, when they were sitting in literal pools of water, well, they osmotically inhaled all of that water and exploded.
Oh my gosh.
Why are you laughing?
So it's sort of like, since I do a lot of camping in really remote areas and overlanding in my Jeep and things like that.
Right.
And there's a lot of things that you have to take in consideration when you're doing that, especially with like hydration and stuff.
Right.
We always, hear that if you like find someone out there who's severely dehydrated, you don't just like have them chug water. You give them a little bit of water at a time to allow that hydration to build back up.
Absolutely.
It's not something you could just dump into somebody.
Right.
Exactly.
Because you could actually kill someone doing that.
You absolutely could. Your cells want to have that water, and if you introduce it all at once, they will absorb too much.
Yeah.
And that's what happened with these microbes, causing this mass extinction.
And they don't exist anywhere else on the planet?
That I don't know. They did not, in the article that I was reading, they did not
golly.
specify what microbes, but I would imagine they have a limited range terrain where they could live. But that means that this is as an indicator for Mars, if we do choose to terraform, that means that if there is microbial life on Mars, it has so completely adapted to its environment, to Martian environment as it is right now, that if we introduce a thicker atmosphere, if we introduce moisture to that air, we are going to cause mass extinction on Mars.
Oh, man.
So we have to make that ethical decision. If there's anything there. We just have to make that ethical decision before we do anything.
Or we can create like isolated zoos for the microbes that are on Mars.
We could.
Or anything.
Like,
But then PETA's going to get on our butts about that.
A Mars
We just go up
microbe
to
farm.
them. It'll be like super tiny, but there's like a dome, and you're just like, oh, look at them. And then we like already terraformed and made our own.
Wait, you mean like how Lisa does with her fish?
They're sitting in the dark.
They're fine.
Schnitzel, I miss you.
Yeah.
But that's really best.
I don't know. I have no sympathy if there are any Martian microbes. I can't even quantify how many microbes that I kill on a daily basis.
But
I
do you
can't
make
even
them go
quantify
extinct,
that.
Mike?
Yeah, killing and extinction,
Mike.
I think, are two
How about
slightly
I
different
unplug
things
the
there.
TV? Okay.
Hey, hold on.
I'm
We're
just
not
kidding.
gonna-
I'm just kidding.
Just knock it down a few notches. I'm sorry. It's
Let's
getting
hold on.
tense.
I will not allow the rambunctiousness of Station 204 to get out of hand. So,
This is an outrage.
so
Give it a
if you continue this, I will throw water on all of you.
But this is interesting. I did want to say.
Don't throw water on me. I'll catch on fire on the TV.
Yeah, we don't need
It's
that.
true. But
Don't get short.
Sarah, you mentioned that because of global warming that this very dry place all of a sudden experienced rain.
Right.
And that's fascinating because that just goes to show you a lot of times people who aren't necessarily convinced about global warming will say, well, it's raining in other places, and it's like, well, yeah, but that's the point. It's the opposite type of weather, and that type of weather, even if it's rain, which is good to us, could be detrimental. Like absolutely, like you said, cause mass extinction. And it's microbes. You can't put them on a leash, Mike. Yet they're still dying.
You should have some sympathy, Mike.
Yes. I'm gonna play
Mike, the life
Microbes
hater.
you all kill on a daily basis. What about that, man?
Wow.
What about the microbes you ingest into your body on a daily basis? What
They
about
can
them?
survive in the
Don't you
eye
feel
belly.
for their plight?
My gut flora is totally fine with my hydrochloric acid.
Yeah. I don't see the problem
Peak
here.
level. I love this.
This is
amazing.
unbelievable.
This reached a whole new level.
All right.
I love it.
Speaking of,
For the
I know what those
microbes.
are.
All right.
Hydrochloric acid
So we've
in the stomach.
Wow.
So we've talked about flora and fauna at other places.
Yes.
Let's speak about some flora and fauna freakouts that
Let's
occurred.
talk about some of that.
bit,
How about
yeah.
we?
Freakouts.
I want to know about this because
right.
this is close to me because this is something that I actually experienced personally myself, and I'll talk a little bit
I would
about
love to hear
my
about
own
it.
personal experience with this.
Okay, and that's
So,
awesome you said that because prior to what I'm about to tell you, everything was anecdotal. Well, most things were anecdotal. So we all know that total solar eclipses are amongst the most intense and dramatic events any human or living being, as it turns out, could ever experience in their lifetimes.
Well, total eclipse of the heart. That's what we're talking about?
That Pat Senator?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's not about looking around.
sorry.
Keep going. I know I derailed it. I'm sorry. Keep going.
No, good job. Basically, last year we had the Great American Eclipse in August 2017.
Yes.
And this was an amazing opportunity for scientists, ecologists to study exactly how animals react, particularly animals who have a very intimate connection with darkness and light. Who have those internal clocks. And what they found was actually pretty awesome. Now, we hear a lot about these anecdotal reports, like Jared, you have a story, and like people are like, oh, I heard crickets chirping all of a sudden. I saw birds fall from the sky. Maybe not. But essentially, they were able to use Doppler radar to detect exactly what creatures did as early as 50 minutes leading up to the eclipse, to totality. So before even humans are able to detect that something wonky's going on, already birds in higher altitudes were like, whoa, something's about to happen. And they actually flew lower. Actually, scientists...
I shouldn't be laughing about this, but this is so funny.
I know, I'm glad it's hilarious. Scientists actually purposed this to the fact that they thought maybe, storms are coming, because they detected a slight dip in brightness, so, you better go get shelter.
Just keep picturing you.
Go on. No, it's fine. It's fine.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, that's one really cool part, is the fact that birds will able to detect it before humans, unless you had specialty goggles to detect any noticeable dip in brightness.
Well, they
or the
say
difference
like
in the
cats
day.
and
Because we have
when we have a Chinese-Russian mission sending taikonauts and cosmonauts to the moon before we send astronauts back to the moon.
Sure, but
That's the only reason why I think people might care.
But we have like laws in place that the United States government has basically said that you are never allowed to collaborate with China ever on space flights. So like are we like, is that kind of like causing us to lose a bit of our edge because we can't cooperate with China? Do we need to like change the laws? Is this kind of like what we should be really sort of aiming towards? Like what's the end game with this between NASA and China?
I would say so, because with the current plan that NASA has, they won't be able to achieve those goals without international support. And with China doing what they're doing, they've pretty much already set the money aside. They've already funded up until 2028, and with international support, they hope to do it even sooner. And the big thing is whether or not Russia would be able to cooperate and add funding level to that. But as far as the United States, I mean, if we do not cooperate with China, as China is becoming kind of, it seems to me like the new leader in space flight, everyone's going to start cooperating with them, and then we're going to be the odd ones left out. The United States and NASA is going to be the ones that are the odd ones left out.
Well, no, don't say that, though. The thing is, all ships rise at the tide. So it's not that we're being left out. We might be getting back to the moon a little bit later than either A, we originally planned, or B, after somebody else gets there as well. Green Jim in the chat room says, be funny that whilst U.S. and China are posturing about whether or / how to get to the moon, that India just rocks it up and does it, which would be amazing. I totally agree with that. That would be very cool.
I kind of want to throw this at you too, Mike, which is that in regards to China, what would Cislunar 1000, which is United Launch Alliance's plan to develop and build and basically get a cislunar economy going, how would China affect that? Would they even affect that? Or would Cislunar 1000 challenge China in what they're planning to do at the moon?
Well, I mean, they don't, as far as official plans and things that have actually been funded, they don't have any plans to start mining resources on the surface of the moon. But they definitely have lots of ideas about that. And so even if United Launch Alliance undertakes their Cislunar 1000 plan and starts mining resources and having propellant depots in orbit, that would be in competition with China, and there might be a race that would be going on if China decides to proceed with that type of architecture as well, and having propellant depots in space and getting the fuel from the moon. And so that might actually be good, because competition is also really good for spaceflight as well.
Yeah. Well, this is definitely it's going to be an interesting decade coming up with all of this going on, and I really hope that we all keep our eyes on it, because it's going to be really, really fun.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And if I recall correctly, China's actually getting ready to launch a probe to the moon in just a little bit, right?
Yeah, the Chang'e 4 lander hopefully will be launching either, is that at the end of this month or in December? I think it's in December. I can't remember.
I know it's sometime around that. So I know it's before the end of the year. So
before the end of this year.
Thought I saw something like an official day announcement. I don't know. I don't know if it's gone any further than that. So, but wow, geez, Mike, that was a pretty deep dive story, and that's really it's exciting, and also like I'm really like super interested to see where all of that ends up because. This is for China. It's been a very long time coming for them. The decades of work into this to make that finally happen with them. So
this could be really cool for the U.S. because I mean, the last time we went to the only time we went to the moon was in competition with somebody else.
Yeah.
So now.
Yeah,
we're coming for you, China.
That statement about the competition,
but
at the same time,
that might be the kick in the butt that we need.
Because Merkel loves to win.
So I still feel like there should be some type of collaboration once we get to the moon, but like that's just my opinion. But wow. Well, I'm excited. New decade.
All right. So what we're going to do, we're actually going to go straight into comments from here. Usually we take a break, but we're just going to go straight into comments. And they are from last week's show. So if our Capcom...
You're the commander, man, so you do you.
Yeah, well, I am doing you today. So Capcom, what was our show about last week? With everything, what did we have with that?
Oh gosh, wait, that's me. Okay,
I was like, I'll take it if you don't, but that's definitely you.
Yeah.
So it was like an awesome roundtable, similar to this. Lots of discussion. It was really fun to watch it. All the different topics that we spoke about, I'm going to kind of run through the list real quick. Europa's plumes being super cold, perchlorates on Mars, the Parker Solar Probe completing perihelion number 1, some floods on Mars, and SpaceX testing their new recovery ship spacesuits and simulators and a mini BFS, which sounds really cool.
Holy crap, we covered a lot of stuff.
Yeah, there was a lot of stuff. It was actually really fun to like look through. And
that was a lot of things.
Nice.
A lot of things that it passed.
Awesome.
So I guess we'll go into my comment that I chose first, which came off of YouTube from Frode Stokeseth. Which was it's a wall of text, but I'll get through this pretty quick. We were talking.
Wow.
Thanks, Ben. We were talking about the responsibilities of the United States and Russia in terms of launching people to the space station. So, Frode said this: swapping seats between Soyuz and U.S. crew vehicles is not just a random convenience, but based on fundamental demands and contractual obligations. International Space Station operations are based on always having both, at least one Russian having primary responsibility for the Russian segment on board, and always having at least one American having primary responsibility for the U.S. segment on board. The only way to guarantee that, even when things like the recent Soyuz failure happens, is to always have at least one Russian and one American on each and every crew vehicle, regardless of whether it is Soyuz or a U.S. crew vehicle. Very, very true. Soyuz MS-10, there were only 2 astronauts on board, 1 Russian, 1 American. There you go. And I did forget about the fact that the International Space Station basically has a U.S. orbital segment and a Russian orbital segment, so it makes completely perfect sense why you would have a specific astronaut from those specific countries there as well. And even looking back at other Soyuz missions, like the upcoming one, we've got a Russian, an American, and a Canadian that are going to be flying up on December 3rd. Even looking back at the shuttle missions for the crew rotations that they would do, there was always 1 American and 1 Russian, and then another astronaut from somewhere involved with that. So, there you go. Really cool justification for that there.
I'm wondering if we actually end up getting into like a major competition with China, right, about going back to the moon. Do you think, if they actually do make it to the moon before we go back, that they're going to be kind of like maybe that third astronaut that's going to be kind of mandatory? Because, like Russian and Americans, they were in the space race in the 60s. And now if we're in the space race with China, do you think that that's going to be kind of like, I think it should be sort of a mandatory thing then at that point to have at least a Chinese astronaut as well. And then maybe some other ones. But I just think that there's something we can bring different to the table if we bring in other nations.
Yeah, and you're going to have to change U.S. law to do that.
Yeah. So. Which I wonder if that would ever change, but we could talk about that another time.
Yeah. That's politics. We could do a whole show on that. So,
that's interesting.
We want to.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, Capcom, it's your...
My turn.
Your own.
Okay,
comment,
so I
though.
think this was in reference. Oh my gosh, my microphone. Okay, I think this was in reference to the perchlorates on Mars, or the Parker Solar Probe. I'm not too sure.
No, this was about
the flooding.
It was about the flooding.
Sarah's,
Okay.
Yeah.
Sarah's,
So I really just loved this question. I thought it was really cool, so I wanted to get the answer from you guys. So it's from YouTube, from another Glenn. So they say, hang on a second. If we put a dipole on in the Lagrange points between Mars and the Sun, would it need to produce thrust toward the Sun in order to stay at the Lagrange point? If it is deflecting the solar wind, does the solar wind exert a force on the dipole? Yes? No? Would it be easier to wrap a coil of wire around Mars itself? So I just like the idea.
That sounds complicated. I don't know a whole lot about it.
Yeah.
But
But Sarah, do you have the answer for this?
So about whether or not
Yeah.
the dipole would need thrust, I would imagine yes.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking as well.
But easier to wrap a coil around Mars itself? Heck no. That's a physical wrapping around an entire planet.
Yeah.
That's going to be,
That's like a level of villainy that we don't have
It
in
is.
engineering at the moment.
Yeah.
not yet. We're like, those are like...
This is such a
that's
visual
like
comic
ring
for me.
world
That's literally
level.
why I chose it. Yeah.
But my understanding of
Lagrange.
Lagrange points is that they are these sort of weird Bermuda Triangle points where they're
Gravitational balance
Right,
points.
they're neutral
Yes.
gravitational balance, right? So they whatever you put there in theory stays essentially there
Right.
for the most part. So why is a dipole different? / what is a dipole?
Okay, so a dipole, it's going to be just a source for a magnetic field.
Okay.
It is, a dipole means it has two poles. It's a north and a south, creating a deflective shield all in one piece.
Captain America.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So,
Yes.
and so...
But invisible.
Right.
Right. Except for the deflection of the solar particles,
Right.
which is what allows us to see the Earth's magnetic field.
Okay.
Ish. Well, I mean...
We see those as like the
Not,
northern
yeah,
lights.
not invisible light, but yeah. So in the charged particle effects. So what would happen is you put it at the Lagrange point, and yes, if it was not really even things like Kepler, which was at a Lagrange point. No, Kepler wasn't at a Lagrange point. No, James Webb is going to a Lagrange point. So it is going to need some station keeping.
Okay.
But on top of that, the point of the dipole itself is to be a deflective shield.
Copy.
So
Okay.
while it's not receiving, I mean, there's such a thing as solar wind pressure.
Right.
Right.
Just
that they mentioned.
yeah, just even dust in the asteroid belt is being shifted by solar wind.
Okay.
So this dipole would be affected by that as well as if. So one of the points of the dipole is to deflect the solar radiation. If what happens to Earth's magnetic field is that if the sun has a really big moment of coronal mass ejection, hard wind coming at you, it splits the magnetic field, like Athena was talking about, and is kind of almost can make an exposure to the platform itself. Then it would definitely need adjustments.
Okay.
After
So, yeah, last week we were
accumulated
talking-
deflection by solar pressure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So
That's so
eventually,
cool. Yeah.
so
Yeah.
you would need to build it with the ability to adjust, but it wouldn't be huge because it would be at a Lagrange point.
Interesting.
Nice.
Okay. So yeah, that's literally why I asked the question. I felt like I knew it on today, and I was like, I know Sarah will have the answer. So that I thought that was a great question. I'm really happy about that. I still like the whole wrap a coil around Mars itself idea. But you know, yeah.
Super ridiculous, but I had a couple years ago I wrote like a short where a friend and I were arguing about how to regenerate Mars's magnetic field, because the question from earlier was, does Mars have a magnetic field? And the answer is no. It does not have. So Earth's magnetic field is created by we've got a solid iron core and we've got a churning molten iron core around that, and the convection and rotation of that molten core around the solid core creates a magneto, which is what drives our magnetic field. Mars, we think it has a molten core, but we do not see any evidence of a magnetic field. We don't think it's convecting the way it used to.
Okay.
We think it is cooled enough that it doesn't convect
It does have
the
a
way
couple
Earth's
of pockets
does.
of magnetic
Yes.
anomalies. So.
Right. So it's got some stuff, but it's not a protective shield the way Earth has.
Okay.
And one of the things that I was, instead of putting a wire around Mars, one of my ideas was a satellite network. And you can channel the solar wind around, and then even at the far side in the magnetotail, you could have focusing equipment to redirect any incoming impactors. So if we're going to this effort of creating a magnetic field around Mars, well, that's because we would have people on the surface. We would want to protect those colonies from incoming impactors if there was anything life-threatening.
Yeah.
If we could create a solar beam deflection array on the backside of Mars.
Kind of like the video you see with the paper airplane and all of the fans all pointing in like a similar direction, so that it just continues to spin around and around and around. Like that.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. See, now I got
Very
it.
cool.
I love this.
Perfect.
All right.
Thank you.
Very good.
Hey.
Pretty good.
Awesome.
So,
Thanks for answering.
Mission Specialist 1.
Now
That's me.
All
That's
right,
you.
cool.
I'm sorry.
Let's see it.
No, that's right.
It's not me.
Okay, so John Bravo on YouTube. Okay, so it was talking about when we start talking about terraforming Mars, he referred back to Robert Zubrin and his solution or his comment that you cannot use 21st century mind to solve a 24th century problem. Whenever the time arrives that we are terraforming Mars, the ways in which we achieve it today would be completely unimaginable. The problem will be solved by a solution sometime in the future. Okay. Yes. Right? The reason we have these problems, the reason we're talking about these issues is because we don't have the technology today. But if we don't talk about them today, if we don't discuss the issues, if we're not imagining now, we're never going to get there by the 24th century. So these questions, these discussions, they are necessary to get us to the point where we can actually perform the act.
Yeah.
So I hope you're with us on that. I think I love these discussions. The imagination, just the free thought that it encourages.
Yes.
So,
very cool. All right. Mission Specialist 2.
That's me.
Let's hear your comment.
All right, this is from Simon from our community, which everybody can pitch in on. Simon says, unfortunately, processing all sources available on Mars would only increase the pressure to about 7% of that of Earth. Slightly frowning face. This research was supported in part by NASA through the MAVEN spacecraft and Mars Odyssey Themis projects. Use data gathered from NASA's Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter and Mars Odyssey spacecraft. And this was going along about a conversation that was about last week's show about, I'm assuming, terraforming and simulating a similar, so anyways, I thought this was interesting because the comment right after that had mentioned that 7%, although small, it's still good because that's just above the Armstrong limit, which I recently learned is basically it's the height that the atmospheric pressure is so low that the boiling point for water equals that of the normal human body temperature.
Whoa.
And so we all can imagine the terrible things that would happen if we were all of a sudden to not reach that limit. So I think it just goes to show you that no matter how small or seemingly incremental an innovation is, it'll all still add up to something quite profound, because they said that 7% still good, just above the Armstrong limit, which means you don't need a hard spacesuit to keep your body fluids from boiling. And that is a huge time and weight saver. So even though it's not exactly like it would be on Earth, it will still save a lot of resources. Yes.
Yeah.
Interesting.
We could look more like the Martian instead of walking around in... Yeah.
Just to kind of
Like the Michelin Man.
Just to kind of throw this out
Michelin
there.
Man.
The summit of Mount Everest, which is very difficult for people to breathe at.
Yeah.
Basically, the summit of Everest, the human body doesn't really work all that well.
No.
That is 36% of the atmospheric pressure that we have down here at sea level. So 7%, you're going to be even worse off than you are at the summit of Mount Everest.
Oh,
so
yeah.
just to
throwing it out
clarify
there.
here, don't take your spacesuit off, even on terraformed Mars.
Yes.
So, really bad stuff. All right,
hilarious.
now, moving on to the hologram for our final comment of the day.
Hologram.
And I feel like we've covered this one quite a bit already, but this comment comes from Streetwind regarding the U.S. and China cooperation in space. And basically the point is that the person who's mainly responsible for maintaining the provision for not allowing NASA to cooperate with China, just lost their re-election. So while there's no guarantee, it's possible that the provision may be removed at some point in the future. NASA is always eager to cooperate with China, very true, and they just aren't allowed to. And that provision never goes, then you can be sure that something will happen fairly quickly after that. And yeah, there are lots of people that have been in support, not just from NASA, but there have been a couple of people within Congress who talked about cooperating with China. But of course, the main reason why we don't is a lot of the human rights violations and things like that. But with the way that the elections turned out, we might be able to get rid of that provision, because it's not like this is set in stone. This isn't an amendment to the Constitution or something like that. This is just this is a ban that can be taken away. So I think that there is a good potential for that, and I think it's the responsibility for those of us who are in the United States to contact our local representatives and tell them what we, the people, want.
Yeah.
Worldwide cooperation.
Very important. Yeah. And however you feel about that, go ahead and contact them and let them know what you think about it.
Yeah, or if you feel completely the opposite, you make sure that you're represented.
Absolutely. Yeah, let your voice be heard. And I just kind of want to throw a little thing on there that maybe we could talk about at the end of the year, which is that in the midterm election that we just had, quite a lot of the representatives who are very pro-NASA and things like that were actually voted out. Typically when you're running for election, NASA's not really something that you put on your agenda of this is what I'll do when I get into office. So it'll be 2019 is going to be a little bit interesting to see where the barometer is going to shift for some of these things, but that's for another show somewhere else. And to wrap up our show today, we want to thank you folks, the citizens of tomorrow, by thanking our Escape Velocity citizens. You give us $10 or more per episode, you get some really cool stuff for that. And we also have our orbital citizens. You give us $5 or more per episode, and every little bit helps. And we don't just have orbital citizens, we also have suborbital citizens as well. They give us $2.50 per episode, and as you can see, there's quite a large number of you there. So get out your Sharpie, find yourself, and circle yourself on the screen. You know, it's a good way to do it, to find your name. That you put right there, right?
As more people start to contribute.
Try rate.
Yeah. And then, if this was not small enough text for you, here's the ground support citizens. They give us anywhere from $1 to $2.49 per episode, and every little bit helps. You are the reason why we're able to make this show happen. It is just so fantastic that we are able to do this. So, next week, we will have Orbit 11.46.
Yes.
It'll be the Saturday after Thanksgiving for us here in the United States. So bring your leftovers.
Bring your stretchy pants.
Be in a food coma. Bring your stretchy pants. And bring your relatives that you may not like as well.
Love us.
We'll launch them to space for you. So
We can all have a conversation with them.
yes, we could.
Yeah, with St. Tofurkey.
Right? Please bring your family's questions about space. We would love to answer them.
Yes.
Oh, boy, excellent. So
And
thank you.
maybe it sounds crazy, but we should go around and talk about what we're thankful for that came from spaceflight.
Yeah.
Maybe we should do that, because Ben loves spin-offs. So, on that bombshell, thank you so much for watching Orbit 11.45. We'll see you next week after dark, right after this.
It's a little chill.
Getting the crumbs
I
everywhere.
gotta figure out how to put these
Boy,
things on
I
properly.
need coffee.
I know.
Holy crap, I'll be right back.
Oh, Ben is joining us.
Hey, Ben. I don't have a microphone, so I just
Are we doing the post-show wrap-up right now?
Sure, if you want.
Well, I mean, we have After Dark.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
What's up, y'all?
Forgot about After Dark.
I,
wait, no,
I like Jared's camera because I'm like,
Yep.
I'm cut off.
Yeah.
Wait.
I'm fit.
Hey, Lisa! I was just gonna say, Lisa. It's Lisa. You had to duck.
Barely.
Great job, Lisa, on the Electron launch.
Yay!
Do you have ears?
Electron.
No, she
I
doesn't.
like to say great job on the electron.
Yeah.
Yes.
That stream was amazing.
A lot of fun. My goodness.
Really quickly, to thank the patrons, I want to be very clear. All of these people that you see on screen, you will also notice that you do not see Dutta and you do not hear Kitty. They are both on vacation right now. We have enough people. Like, you have helped us be able to pay these people to be here. And we have, like, that's what your money, part of what your money goes to. So I wanted to thank you for that because this would not be possible. And we have enough people that we can kind of flip people in and out.
Yeah, we would have had to cancel the show.
Normally we would have had to cancel the show for sure. For sure.
I feel bad that Athena has to hold the microphone, but also I think it's a little hilarious and quite clever. So
on the pencil.
I'm going to,
It's fabulous.
I'm going to say it is a little bit fabulous.
I'll bet $1, Bob.
I don't get it.
Oh, no!
The price is right.
Price is right in
He has this
Australia.
weird stick mic.
Except we have different presenters and not a stick mic.
Well, yeah, because back in the day, it was a million years ago, it was a stick mic like that.
See, there's his microphone.
Never seen that
Itty bitty
guy
stick
ever.
microphone.
It's hilarious.
Long, thin microphone.
Love Bob Barker.
I'm Bob.
Oh, so for those of you complaining about the DVR functionality, I actually don't know why it's not working. So it's not, to the best of my knowledge, it's not us shutting it down. And I double checked. We are not in super low latency mode. At least YouTube says we're not. So I don't know why it's not working. And it's like replicatably not working. So I don't know. I'll keep looking into it. Something's wrong.
Hey, I don't know who can answer this, but Neuropilot from Twitch says, at tomorrow, when will Rocket Labs, actually is what it says, have an Australian subsidiary. I can't say it.
When will Rocket Lab have an Australian subsidiary?
Subsidiary.
Now you've done it to me.
Sorry.
The answer is right now. They do at this exact moment in time.
All right, cool.
So the way Rocket Lab works is Rocket Lab is a U.S. company. It's even in their title. It's Rocket Lab USA.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, at least
I love the death stare.
Hey,
Up Australia and New Zealand.
wait.
By the way, thank you,
Australia,
Matt.
you're right, an Australian subsidiary. Yeah. Oh, they're all in the same area.
Wow, is that really what you meant? You really screwed that up that
I
badly?
really did screw that up. Yeah, no,
Well,
she's
Yeah, I was like, what are you
Australian, so-
talking about?
Yeah,
That is
so-
such crap, man. And I don't know if anybody noticed during the launch minute, but that flag looked kind of funky.
I wasn't sure if people
No?
would get angry at me for doing that or not.
Wait, what did you? I didn't see
Oh, you
it.
didn't see it?
Oh, you have to go back and watch.
Lisa's gonna go replay it. Everyone.
You mean I have to watch this show?
Yeah, but you're gonna have to probably get up and look at
No,
the
you
flag.
won't have to
Okay.
look that closely. I think it's
I
pretty
gotta-
obvious.
It's
I gotta
hilarious.
see.
You talking
That's
about
all
the
the
Earth flag?
project.
Or
Yeah.
I'm holding it. Yeah.
Oh, gosh.
Oh, you did put a new flag.
What's going on?
Flying to America throughout that.
It slowly happens the entire time the U.S. overtakes.
Wait, isn't that a New Zealand flag? Because isn't this a New Zealand launch? I don't understand.
Yeah, but it's slowly sliding to the American flag. That's,
Wait,
oh
does
my
that,
God.
Jane, does that look like an American flag?
From here,
David
yeah.
Adams, thank you very much.
Like a New
Very
Zealand
much.
flag just a couple of seconds ago?
David Anderson, thank you very much. Thank you very much, David Anderson. Hey guys, thank the people.
So there have
Oh my
been,
God.
there were a number. I apologize. They got deleted out of my host chat room, but I think it was Beth BEF said something along the lines of how New Zealand should get some credit for the Rocket Lab launch. I don't know if Beth, if you were watching, with the New Zealand flag up front, and then it slowly becoming the U.S.
It feels appropriate because it feels like.
Yeah.
So emotionally, Rocket Lab launches feel like they should be New Zealand, right?
Yeah.
So
Right.
every part of me
Yeah.
says
Yeah.
a Rocket Lab launch should have the New Zealand flag and should count towards New Zealand. 100%. I'm sorry, 99.999% of my body says that that's how they should be. Unfortunately, technically speaking,
Yep.
that's incorrect. Technically speaking, it's a U.S. Company, and so it goes to the U.S. launch, and so that's why I thought it appropriate to have the New Zealand flag stomped on by the U.S. flag, which is kind of how I viewed it, because that's how it feels. It feels like the U.S. is just yanking this launch, even though it's not actually the U.S. doing it. No, in a way it is, because it's our stupid ITAR laws.
There you go.
Yeah, ultimately that's what I assume, I'm making wild assumptions, but I assume it's our stupid ITAR laws that drive Rocket Lab having to incorporate in the United States and be a U.S. company because they need to get the avionics and the, what am I trying to say, the prop. They probably really want prop from the U.S. In order to do that, they have to something U.S., and then I assume there's a whole bunch of paperwork and things, so stuff and things.
It's a headache.
Q hold that.
Yeah, I'll hold it. Okay, goodbye.
Bye.
Now I'm very present on the microphone. This will be my reading hour.
Oh
By
God.
the way, we had quite a few super chats. So thank you to Matt, thank you to Dan Anderson, and thank you to Kevin M for your guys' tips and for your support. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Oh yeah,
Those are
thank you.
generous too.
Yeah, thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Oh yeah, so Jess, throw it back. Bet I just want to win my bet. You know, I'm not going to argue too much against Rocket Lab being a U.S. company because I think having two more U.S. I'm near positive I'm going to lose my bet with Mike. Yeah. And I'm actually legitimately surprised. That was a bet I thought I was going to easily win. And I'm not so sure
You know
anymore.
what? We didn't answer. I was going to ask, but I didn't want to, at the very first segment, run too long. With the
And yet somehow we did, Jared. I feel so.
we're going to talk about that in a minute. But
right.
sincerely, I
sorry
have a
about that.
question.
Yeah.
With the launches that are currently planned that we know of, what is the standing between China and U.S.?
I think the U.S. wins by one.
Right, that we know of.
I don't
Possibly.
I don't remember.
Yeah.
It was very close.
Okay.
U.S. used to win by a few, like 2 or 3.
Quite a few.
Yeah. Well, back when we made the bet, it wasn't that many. It was like 2 or 3. It might have been 4. But China's been like, ha 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 ha! We see that Ben made a bet with Mike. We don't want Ben to win.
Ruined his life.
Yeah, that's what they did. I assume that's what
The
happens,
whole
right?
world's against
China
you,
hates
Ben.
me. Yeah.
Yeah, the
I
whole
assume- I
world.
assume that's
Everything's
what
about
happened.
you, by the
That's
way.
true. That's true. I agree with
Makes
that
sense.
statement.
Johnny Spacer.
Space actually says that.
Actually,
The Chinese are watching this show.
Actually, I know. Actually, I happen to know if you go to Community, that is a true statement. Although it's kind of blocked in China because of YouTube.
Yeah.
So I would love to actually get the show into China because we're not anti-China, we're pro-space, and China is doing great.
Yeah.
That's okay. Aren't we available?
Oh.
Yeah.
Aren't we available as a podcast on iTunes and other places you can get podcasts?
The Great Firewall of China blocks a lot of that stuff.
Just saying.
Slash all of it.
Just saying.
I couldn't download Facebook.
Ivar Hemminson from YouTube. I apologize if I'm butchering your name. Says, how about private companies versus nation state launches?
Well, he said lunches.
Oh, he did say lunches.
I feel like private company lunches are better than like.
There's a wrap up
Government
about
cheese.
in the community forums right now. Someone made a post about it.
In Community, there's a wrap up about that?
Yeah.
So, Ivar, if you're listening, head up community.tmro.tv, and there should be a post on there about that, according to Miss Lisa back here.
Yeah. So there you go.
Lunches sounds good.
Lunches
does sound good. I'm hungry. I'm hungry.
Tasty word.
So it was a 2-segment show today. It was not supposed to be a 2-segment show, and I thought I got the nod from Jared acknowledging. So I have
So Jared was having a number of issues with his chat room. He actually had to go into incognito mode in order to make that go. We
Yes.
will chat about that later with other things
So
and people.
I have- yes.
Once I figured that out, then we got some
something called
basic
big
communication
words.
going.
Right,
that
so-
actually worked out pretty well.
wait, the thing.
Big words.
Big words on my iPad, right? So you can see, kind of see, but like, this is what these are the cues.
Are you going to
that I-
stretch your mouth so you can get
were you
all those
doing
big
that?
words come right out? Yeah. Did you
yeah.
not see him?
Yeah, I saw him.
I was
Yeah.
giving everyone
Absolutely.
here cues as to
were in
timing
context?
and what I would like to see next.
We
For
were at
example,
30 minutes, we were
I
at 50
had
minutes,
a
we were
slit
at
on
70
here that
minutes.
said, after this convo, go to break.
Yep.
And I thought I got a head nod from Jared indicating acknowledged. Apparently I didn't. And then I brought it over to Lisa and I didn't tap on the window, but I'm like, this is a thing. And she acknowledged. She's like, got it.
Go to break.
So she queued up.
She
ready to
queued
go.
up, and Jared still missed
And
it,
then
and I was
Jared-
like, "Oh my god, I'm gonna die
And
right
then
now."
Jared went to the next news story. I'm like, oh, maybe he didn't understand.
And I also-
maybe he just went.
I nearly pulled a Ben, and I was like, "Cool, break," because I was so mad about it. And I'm like, "No, that's not fair, and that's totally
Yeah.
fine." Because Carrie Ann does not like have to play Ben and Carrie Ann. Okay, that is not something that is a
Good cop,
fan
bad
of.
cop. It's bad cop, bad cop.
Ben
I
Cop.
made mom and dad mad.
No!
Yes.
No! Why
You
did I?
did. We still
I'm
love
sorry,
you.
world, for making that.
It's Ben Cop.
No.
It's a thing.
No, it was fine. It did feel like there was like a natural break, and then
So then-
Jared's like, "We're gonna keep talking."
So
and I was
then,
like, "Oh, okay, cool."
Oh no, it gets better than that. So then I'm like, all right, I realize he's just going through the rundown, right? 'Cause
Right. Yeah.
the rundown doesn't actually have breaks. Right. So the rundown, we have a rundown of the show, and it has like the news and the things. And it used to be when we were highly scripted, we had, this is exactly what we're going to do in this order.
Right.
And since we've gotten the conversational tone, we don't actually know how long each conversation is going to take. So we have to kind of gut check. Like we'll time it out and be like, we have to go. All right. Well, it feels like this is a good breaking point. We'll break here. And so there.